On this episode of Negative Modifier, I'll be playing Horse Girl. Horse Girl is a solo tabletop RPG that, if I'm being honest, weirded me out some while I was playing it. So, yeah, listener discretion definitely advised on this one.
Charlie is a woman in her late 20s. Life has not been kind to her, as much as she tried to make things work. Her career was a mess, she was estranged from those who were supposed to love her, and she felt utterly lost in life, not knowing who she was and what you were supposed to do. But things changed when Charlie met him. A handsome, intelligent young doctor who came into her life and saw the light in her where everyone else saw emptiness. Like Charlie, he's lived a lonely life. Deep beneath his confident personality and self-assured composure, you know that there's a vulnerable, forlorn little boy who just wants to be loved. To love him became Charlie's purpose. To truly live was to live with him and for him. As time went on, Charlie fell deeper in love as you grew further and further away from her friends and family, to the point where she barely seemed to exist anymore. That's okay though. No one's ever made her feel the way he's made her feel. With him, Charlie finally feels safe. So when he offered her a room in his mansion where the both of them can live together in bliss for the rest of their lives, you say yes. Even if the sole condition is that Charlie will be surgically and mentally transformed into a horse. An entirely new body and mind is such a small price to pay for a lifetime of peace and happiness.
Horse Girl is a solo tabletop RPG that uses six-sided die, a deck of playing cards, and traditionally a Jenga tower. In this playthrough of Horse Girl, I will be using the optional countdown dice system in lieu of the Jenga tower, which is that I have 3 d10s that every time I am instructed to draw from a Jenga tower, I will instead decrease those down by 1. Think of those as kind of my life points. Horse Girl, as a journaling game, is played in a set time span. Each entry, I will roll d6, draw a set of cards equal to that d6 roll, and then respond according to those cards. One of two things will happen. I will either escape this nightmare I found myself in, or I will be turned into a horse. Let's see what happens. Month number 1. So that's a 5 and a 6 for my dice rolls. So that means 6 cards. I am laying face down so I can dramatically reveal them and respond accordingly to them as I go through. Card number 1, 8 of diamonds. All right. Candlelight dinner. Dear Journal, you prepared a feast for both of us. A finely curated selection of all my favorite food dishes, stretching all the way back into childhood. Include organic desserts, vegetarian mains, and it was all incredibly well researched. He somehow knew my favorite cookies were chocolate chip cookies with sea salt, and that, despite what I tell people, I really do enjoy a hot chocolate lava cake. I'm traditionally not a big fan of vegetarian food, but when it's prepared well, it can be just absolutely fantastic. This was a onion-based dish, I believe. A mix of onions, spinach, and something else I wasn't quite aware of. He refused to tell me what it was, but it had an almost noodle-like texture to it. It wasn't noodles. He insisted on that. My suspicion is that it might be shredded cabbage or something along those lines. 8 of diamonds says I decreased my counter by 1, so I now have 29. Later on this month, King of Spades. Facial elongation. I awoke after having slept for quite a while. I don't remember falling asleep, but I felt my face had been changed, slowly repositioned and molded into something more equine. I noticed mass was missing from other parts of my body, as though someone had sculpted and removed and crafted and moved about muscle and fat to add to my face to further change it. I have not looked in a mirror yet, for I fear what I may look like. It's been a traumatic experience. I can feel the weight. There's pain in my neck. It feels to almost draw me forward into it's very strange thinking of having your adapt into a new weight in one's face. It's almost like a weight hangs off of what used to be a foot or so beyond my nose. But now I could not describe it. As my first of the king cards, 4 of these, and I am screwed. And after that, I decrease my counter once again. Down to 28. 10 of clubs. Your first time. I don't remember when my dream started drifting back to this. Perhaps it was when I was under during the surgery. I don't fully know, if I'm being honest. But I remember I remember my first time. It obviously wasn't with my with him, but it did make me feel good about myself. Not that my current situation makes me feel any better about it, I suppose, but it haunted me for years. I was young, mistakes were made, obviously, and I swore to never put myself in a situation like that where I'd break my heart again. And once again, my counter goes down. Ten of Hearts, his devotion. It's quite strange, if I'm being honest. I don't remember telling him about my dreams and my resentment for a man so long ago, but he offered to track him down and kill him for me as a show of devotion, love. I don't quite know, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't flattered a little bit. It's a lot, but at the same time, there's a joy and excitement almost at it being with someone with so much power. I'm not sure what that says about me, but it certainly says something. Six of Diamonds. Do nothing at all. Despite everything that's happened, the dreams, the face, the threats at past lovers, there's a comfort here. I feel as though things are settling in. We can enjoy each other's company without anything happening. Just being in one's presence is enough. I with my silly podcasts, he with whatever doctors do for hobbies. Scrimshaw, I think. It's all quite beyond me. But yes, I feel as though despite the strangeness of the request I've been placed under, there is a comfort and relaxation. And the counter goes down again. And my last card for the month, the 10 of Diamonds, Broken Bird. Towards the end of the month, I was out strolling through one of the many apple orchards, and I came across a injured bird. It was bleeding, it was thrashing, but it wasn't dead just yet. It had a thirst for life and a drive to stay away. And while he initially was resistant to helping it, after a little bit of persuasion, he came around, and given his background, he was capable of mending its wing using a combination of medical tape. I did hope that it would heal, but just yesterday I found it dead in its cage. It's been hard. I can't help but see the comparisons between I and a bird. He mended me, or he is attempting to fix me as he attempted to fix the bird, and I now find that I am slightly fearful for what his medication may wind up resulting in. At the end of the first month, I have 26 health, for lack of a better phrase, remaining. All right, month 2. Rolling the die to see how many cards I pull. 5. Journal entry 2. 9 of clubs. The X. Perhaps it was my dreams, perhaps it was my feeling of being trapped, perhaps my mind is just wandering more and more lately, but find myself thinking of a certain man from my past. It's been quite some time and we did not part on the best ways, but my current situation cannot help but make me worry about this situation. It is increasingly complicated, unsettling, and despite the fact that he couldn't keep his promises, he never wanted to turn me into another animal before. At least there I felt as though I was enough. At least me being a human was enough for him, which is a strange sentence to put out there at all. But yes, that was another point lost. Ace of clubs. I found myself thinking of my life beyond this locale at one point. The life I used to have, specifically home where I grew up, on the opposite coast, near the ocean, where it always smelled of salt and the weathers were extreme and to the extent of almost being, well, it made one wonder why the hell people still live there to a certain extent. Why, when people initially even showed up there, they said, yeah, this is fine, we should stay. I found myself thinking of the woods some. Very different from the woods of where I now live. Thick, old, eldritch in their own way. Nothing like the many-time burned trees of California. Nothing like that at all, sadly. Despite the fact that you could feel as though you could get lost in those woods and no one had ever found you, there was a certain comfort to it. Also, in a weird way, you never quite felt alone, but maybe because you thought something strange was out there, maybe just because life didn't have to worry about their homes getting burned down. There was always squirrels, birds, and whatnot that at least did make it quiet. That will decrease my health again. My stability, I suppose I should call it. 8 of clubs. Friends. Didn't always feel alone like I do now. I had friends like most people. I could say they were closer than family in some ways. They were people I could rely on regardless of the situation, regardless of what I asked of them or what they asked of me. And then we all just drifted away. It was a slow process. It wasn't like overnight I suddenly had no one to talk to, but keeping up relationships, the farther and farther you are from people, the harder and harder it becomes. And people change. Life takes its toll on you. You stop being the same person that they knew. And yeah, suddenly you find you have no way of communicating with them in a way that helps them understand. And here I am now, wondering if any of my former friends even have noticed that I have secluded myself away with him, that I am essentially gone from day to day life. Honestly, I find myself wondering if they knew if they would even care. Probably not. It's hard to care about something you have no real relationship with anymore. 8 of Hearts. His gifts. I think one of his traits that I was attracted to the most at first was how well he listens, how anyone can listen. He actually listens. He picks up on small things and then has a way of following up on them, letting to be asked. And it's not just me that he listens to. He listens to everyone. His friends, staff, his coworkers. It occasionally feels like you can even just kind of mumble something in the general vicinity and then bam, either they're tend to it or try and go out of his way to procure something or something along those lines that will help in that situation. Almost daunting in its own way. It's almost daunting because he is open to the same treatment back. He's not off put by small gestures or large gestures. Everything you do for him is appreciated. There's no judgment on anything that you try and do. No, I didn't really want this. No, why did you buy this? It truly does make me feel needed. Last but not least for the month, suppose last but not least, King of Hearts, his everything. It feels weird to put this at the end of this month, but perhaps it's the most important thing and therefore should go last. We are engaged to be wed. He said yes. Despite his strange request and the time I've spent here, very obvious that I need him and he needs me just as much, if not more. And that needing to be needed by someone it's intoxicating. So much so I felt myself compelled, almost driven to make him mine. And I know it's not traditional that I would propose in this situation given everything of it, but here we are. Not only did he say yes, but he said yes in a way that everyone dreams of. It's not just a yes, it's a yes with every fiber of their being. Tearful, awash with emotions. I couldn't ask for anything else. We end the month with 23 stability points. Since that was my second king, I am now halfway to giving in and taking the plunge on the horse transformation. Lucky me. Month number 3. Hey, got a 3. It's only 3 cards this time. Some of these months have been downright brutal. First up, Ace of Spades, Wilderness Training. I will not pretend that things have not taken a turn for the strange. I was encouraged as of late to roam the great extents of the estate freely as I so chose. I'm not sure I realized that I was not invited to do so, but here we are. A formal invitation is always nice, I suppose. And yes, it was under the slightly strange condition, though, that I do it fully naked and that I avoid contact with other humans, which, given the whole face remodeling thing a month or so back, I don't have a lot of objections to. The nudity thing is a tad strange, but I don't know if there's anyone around to judge me on it, I suppose. It's a wonderful estate. Very broad, very idyllic, everything a person might want from the countryside in many ways. Yes, there's a couple rotted fences out there, but it's truly impressive. It feels like its own little world of sorts. Again, you get right up to the edge and you feel like turning back because the outside world just isn't for you anymore. It's hostile, it's dark, it's unsettling or something along those lines. It's perhaps he feels comfortable with me. Perhaps he knows I've settled into my life here. But yes, the lack of clothing outside has taken a bit of time to get used to. But it is nice to feel the sunshine and whatnot. So this is my first ace card, I believe. So this is my first useful ace card, and what this means is it does not do anything yet. But if I pull the ace of hearts, it means I can start basically working towards getting the fuck out of here or getting an escape plan of some kind. I don't have the ace of hearts yet, so yeah, you're just hoping that shows up. So maybe I can win this thing. It does give me a boost. It lets me, if I roll a 5 or a 6 on whatever the mechanism for that card is, I suspect that expands it from just a 6 to a 5. So yeah, see if I draw that. Next up, 7 of Hearts. His voice. Perhaps it's isolation, perhaps it's something else, but I have found that I have come to appreciate the occasional sternness in his voice when he tells me to shut up and stop being annoying and whatnot and stop complaining. I suspect at one point in time this might have been something I had issue with, but sometimes it's nice to just let go and someone make decisions for you. And why not? It's been perfectly safe here, aside for that whole surgery. Perhaps was part of the initial deal we struck in his mind, but alas. And that decreases my stability by 1. Last but not least for the month, 4 of Clubs. Siblings. I never thought of myself as close with either my brother or my sister. As the oldest of the family, it was always hard seeing the other two benefit from mistakes our parents made with me. I didn't resent them for it exactly, but they definitely seemed to got the easier time of it and the benefit of a tad less paranoia around certain topics. We were never close, I guess. There's a bit of an age difference and also just a lack of interest on my part. Being a tad older meant I was just far enough out of their lives that they were at a very different stage than I was. And yeah, the number of things we had in common was minimal at best, which one could argue was a me issue, not so much a their issue. But by the time you're old enough to realize that, I'm not sure it's easy to come back from that. Maybe I'll fix that someday. Maybe I won't. If I'm being honest, I didn't even think about them when I made the choice to move in with him and agree to this preposterous idea of his. I find myself wondering if they've even noticed that I have gone missing at this point. I suspect they probably have, but what do I know? At the end of month 3, I have 22 stability. All right. Month 4. The Queen of Hearts. His loyalty. I know I write a lot in here about the loneliness and the isolation and how it feels as though I've been cut off from the real world, but probably just be venting. There is something nice about how much he needs me, how if he can't find me, he searches and screams and almost goes into a panic until he's capable of finding me. I've taken on a couple occasions hiding or not responding to his inquiries to where I'm at just to see his reaction. He's not exactly angry, but more exhausted in the way that someone's just relieved when they see you after you found something. It's like so many things about him, just absolutely intoxicating. All right, that's another lost stability point. And last for the month, the 6 of Clubs. Grandparents. I don't really remember my grandparents. They died when I was very young or before I was born for the most part, and my parents didn't exactly talk about them much. They were, as best I could tell, a bit of a painful topic, if you will. Not that's not understandable, I suppose, but I do find myself wondering what they were like. Were my parents shaped by them to such an extent that they refuse to talk about them, or the reverse? Do they not live up to their expectations or their shadow, or whatever the right poetic phrase is for that, I suppose? It makes me wonder if I would model myself off my own mother, or if I would try and reject her ideas and become a completely different mother. Keeping in mind this whole ridiculous horse transformation thing I've agreed to, I do find myself wondering if I would tell the foals about my parents or not. At the end of month 4, I have 21 stability left. Month 5. First up, we have King of Clubs. Ah, crap, this is my third king. Sorry, King of Clubs. Safety. Perhaps it's all the time I've had to think. Perhaps it's the fact that I've been here just slightly less than half a year. Perhaps it's been almost half a year of feeling love and affection and safe. I feel as though I finally opened up to him. I don't remember exactly what it was that I said, but I felt as though there were no more secrets left behind us, that I poured out all the pain and mistrust and sadness and hatred I've had in my life. And he wasn't scared by it. He didn't run from it. He listened, he nodded, and there was zero judgments. There was zero recourse, just a hug and a kiss on the forehead at the end of it. And we're feeling safe. I'm not sure I felt that safe ever before. That is my third king, and it drops my stability down by a point, putting me at my first of my D10s gone. Next up, the 9 of spades, mammary gland relocation surgery. This one I was more aware of when it was going to happen. Tad more invasive, one might say, than just some basic plastic surgery. Again, as part of this agreement, the whole horse transformation thing, it was an extensive surgery, relocating. This surgery, given the more involved nature of it, I suppose, is the undetached clinical sound for it, I suspect, involved the relocation of my breasts down to my lower abdomen, around my stomach, kind of like a horse would have. In addition to the relocation, there was some resculpting and elongation and slicing, I guess. A function, I guess, human mammary glands are not compatible with horses or foals, I suppose. I'm not sure I fully understood that part, but in hindsight, it makes a certain amount of sense. I've seen cow udders before, and those are significantly larger than human nipples, which I thought I've ever been forced to have before, I suppose. But yes. And that drops my stability down by 1 as well, quite obviously. Some of these cards are fucking weird. I'm sure it got lost in editing some, but there's definitely a couple of these when I flip them over, when I kind of look up what they are, it's like, what the actual fuck? All right, moving on from that aside. 2 of spades, bedrooming. It was announced today that he had finished constructing my new bedroom. A relatively normal bedroom by all measures, except for the grand king-size bed made of hay and the intricate paintings of grasslands and mountains stretching from corner to corner. He keeps referring it to as my stable, which I suppose is not inaccurate a term, but yes, it makes a certain amount of sense. This is how I would think about things. I've never slept on hay before, and while it's admittedly a bit of a itchy and scratchy and pokey relocation, I'm not going to say it's not uncomfortable. It's not quite a waterbed, but there's a certain conforming aspect to it, and I've never had a room built for myself just before. Always been inherited spaces or spaces people had to give up or move out of before then, so having a space that's, quote, my own, and for us, is a very different and nice change. And last but not least for the month, 9 of diamonds, long rides. We went for a long drive in his pickup truck today. We went the farthest we've been from the estate in the entire time I've been here. So far away, kind of vanished into the distance almost. We drove up into the mountains, and the air was fresher than I've ever experienced in my entire life. You could see for miles. The landscapes were absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure I've ever been in that wild of nature before. You can just kind of see mountains come together, forming the mountain ranges, making where multiple kind of independent, strong peaks come together to form something larger. The valleys merge them together into something new and just as old and just as sturdy. I will say, off in the distance, very, very far away, there was a spattering of small houses, maybe a town or something like that. And I couldn't help but wonder what their lives were like, what they would think of the life I now live. And this is possibly the first time since I came here that I have had true thoughts about what it might be like to be with other people, not with, but just have others around, maybe with as well. Been almost half a year now, and despite the deal I struck and despite being deep into this horse transformation thing, I find myself beginning to worry about the choices I've made. That will drop my stability down. I'm finishing off month 5 with 18 points of stability. I ain't doing great. Not quite half stability gone, but month 6, 4 on Ace of Hearts. All right, first off, Jack of Hearts. His strength. Perhaps our adventure up into the hills the other day has sparked something in me, something he senses. He seems more intent on making me stay than ever before. If I even have the fleeting of a thought about leaving, he is almost there, like he can read my thoughts to banish this thought. The love, the affection he shows is almost as though it's been turned up some, and almost in reaction to my brief thought about what it might like to be with other people in general. I've begun to worry about this. Perhaps I should have been worried all along, but between the transformation and these new intrusive thoughts and a slightly different perspective on what is going on through all of this, it's, I don't know, something about it has become off-putting. I will say, though, that this renewed show of force, strength, the strength of his affection for me, there's not something unappealing about it, if I'm being honest. And it is always nice to be needed and shown how much someone needs you. That's going to drop my stability down. Next up, 5 of diamonds, a wish granted. Perhaps it's a new tactic. Perhaps it's just a continuation of the assurance this is where I belong. He offered to grant me any wish I desired, so long as, 1, it did not involve leaving the estate, and 2, it did not involve reversing the transformation so far. Admittedly, these 2 things were at the top of my list, given my growing unease with the situation, and I found myself baffled. I found myself without an obvious wish to make. Ultimately, I decided to wish for a dog to have some companionship. Brought a herding dog of some kind, shepherd maybe of some type. He described its working heritage and friendliness with farm animals. We all see where his priorities are at this point, I suppose. And well, it's no replacement for a human. The 4-legged companion does at least provide a minor alternative to him. That's going to drop my stability down by 1 again. 3 of spades. Hoofing. Well, it has finally happened. I would go so far as to say that I am running out of ways to look like a horse. The surgery was a success. The surgery where he severed my toes and fingers and attached nailed, I guess is probably the more accurate, large silicon hooves into the bones of my palms and balls of my feet, and then proceeded to stretch the skin over said hooves, welding it together with a mix of, as he put it, silicone and surgical wire. I'm not sure if surgical wire is even a thing, or if silicone is a normal medical applied device or medical applied substance, but here we are. As I mentioned previously, the weight of my reformed face pulled me almost into walking on hands and legs. This has made it all but impossible to do so, and walking is now agony. I can feel it in my back. My weight sits in strange ways on my joints. It's been easier to lie down, which, given the, new strain on my body and new way my feet align with the floor, has involved lying on my stomach more often than not. I believe all this pain is temporary, though. I will adapt to this, as I adapted to the new sense of balance after my face was reorganized. On the plus side, my 4-legged friend has continued to be my stalwart companion, helping me through all of these changes. Oh, the things I've chosen to do for him. I hope he appreciates my sacrifices. And that's going to drop down my stability by 1, quite obviously. Last but not least for the month, the 6 of spades, coat growth. Well, when I said previously I'm not sure there were many ways I could resemble a horse more, I appear to have forgotten an obvious one. He has been applying a ointment of some kind, steroid-infused tonic, as he once described it, all over my skin, which has now begun to cause even the tiniest of my pores to sprout hair. And I am now covered in a layer of fine hair, something I thought I would never, ever say before. He has also now taken to combing. I think that was my first indicator that the ointment was indeed working, was the comments about how he would need to start brushing my coat once or twice a day. Keep it, quote, soft and shiny. All right, so that obviously drops my stability down by 1. Means I finish off month 6 with 14 stability. I am not doing great, obviously. Month 7. 2 of clubs, door. As I increasingly find myself with time to think and remember and dwell in the past before, rather than the reality I find myself in currently. It's strange what one remembers back to. One of my earliest memories has been haunting me more and more. I don't remember exactly what it was. I remember being punished for something, and my strongest memory of this whole series of events was hiding behind a door of some kind. It was my bedroom door, and just sobbing for hours until my eyes burned and taste the salt in the air from my tears. I must have been very young at the time, 4 or 5 at the oldest, and maybe it's the bouts, maybe it's the still receding pain, maybe it's the no longer truly recognizing myself, but I'm not quite sure. But feels though it's hard to shake from my thoughts these days. 5 of Hearts, his touch. While I may find my new form, my hairy, deformed form, unsettling, he does not. The whole groomings aside to maintain my coat, he runs his fingers lovingly over me, my new skeletal structure, my newly aligned body parts. He caresses them with his fingertips. He loves to describe in detail how pleasing I am to him now to his touch, and writes poems that spell out his only ever growing love for me. This drops my stability down by 1. Honestly, I'm not sure what's going to happen first. I'm if I'm going to king out or if I'm going to stability out at this point. 10 of Spades, trot therapy. While he has expressed ongoing love for my, what I think as misshapen body, he has insisted on once again changing it. He locked some type of back brace or body brace onto me yesterday that if you told me it was realigning my spine into something stranger, I would be inclined to believe you. It makes walking upright almost impossible, courtesy of a sharp pain that seems to force upon you in doing so. Maybe it's the hooves, maybe it's the new center of balance, but I gave into this. If I'm being honest, it's been a tad clumsy though. I cannot run. I can barely walk, and I'm assuming you've seen those videos or pictures of dogs wearing shoes. They kind of do that weird high stepping, almost trying to kick something off. It's definitely felt more like that than anything natural. And whenever I fall, he strikes me on the hindquarters, and maybe not quite anger, but almost motivation of sorts. It still stings amongst all the other aches and pains I know currently feel. The option of standing up straight to walk was one of the few, perhaps delusional thoughts I allowed myself at this point, that I was still human, but I've never in many ways felt more like a horse at this point. Despite everything, something about this seems to strike a truly unsettling nerve. This gonna drop my stability down by 1, obviously. Man, these 10 cards are brutal. And last but not least, for month 7, we have the 7 of Diamonds. Intellectual conversation. Despite my changes, we still engage in heated debates, not necessarily arguments, but discussions over intellectual topics with no obvious outcome or goal to it. Science, politics, economic matters, things that just by discussing you feel as though you've learned something about. We've always done this. One of our first shared pastimes, and it's one of my favorite. I do enjoy a good argument where there's nothing truly on the line, I suppose, but there's definitely been a strange shift in topics. For once, we discussed very human matters, for lack of a better phrase. War, poverty, disease, and whatnot. We've now shifted on to more animal husbandry focused topics, I suppose. Some things, ethical treatment of animals, the ethics of how swine are raised, not to involve food and farm life. I suppose that makes a certain amount of sense. The estate here, it feels more and more like a farm with every day. That's not fair. It's still very much an estate, but I become more and more aware of the various farming apparatuses of it or aspects of it. Despite the obvious subject change from our earlier conversations in our relationship, I still appreciate these for what they are, chances to learn and improve and discuss in a heated and excited manner on topics that perhaps we both don't know as much as we think we know about. I'm going to close out month 7 with 12 stability left. I honestly wonder if I'll make it a full year at this point. Month 8. 6. All right. I'm going to put money on I don't survive this month. There's not really much of the deck left. I'm at least halfway through easy. maybe not fully halfway. It feels like halfway. I feel as though that remaining king, the King of Diamonds, is just lurking in there waiting for me, and I have a sneaky suspicion is in the hand I just pulled. These 6 cards I just pulled out of it. So, first up we have 4 hearts. His warmth. Despite everything, despite changes, despite what I feel is my slow questioning of the situation potentially, he has never once grown cold for all of this, always providing both physical and mental warmth to me. A hand, an arm across my spine during the pain, a nurturing voice during the healing processes through all of this. I feel like, as I've said this many times, it's one of the many things that drew him to me initially. Like, knowing as I know him now, it's as though he almost seems to glow, like a fire of some kind, lighting up the world around him. 7 of Spades, mommy. Perhaps it's my relationship with my mother that made his warmth so appealing to me at first. I wouldn't describe her as a cold individual, but to raise my siblings and I, she left a career, a successful career at that. And growing up, I maybe thought she was a tad harsh on all of us, always driving us, trying to mold us into some version of us that perhaps was the result of her having to give that up. It's not quite the same, but I do understand her pain more and more. These past few months, I feel as though I've given up quite a bit. Whatever I left back in the outside world, obviously, but I now find myself in a situation where if I could turn back the clock, and with the knowledge I have now, I do not know how I would respond to the same offer. I suspect she felt something similar. That decreases my stability by 1. And next up, the 6 of Hearts, his world. I'm sure it seems in these passages that I talk as though I'm some type of prisoner. I am not. Could I speak differently? Oh, I'm sure I could. But if I am a prisoner, he is just as much one. He has become, as much as he has become my world, I am his. He remembers, as I've mentioned before, everything about me. How I like my apples peeled, what I like to do when I'm alone, what books I enjoy, what colors of carrots I prefer at the end of the day versus not. There's not a detail about my life that is not, in some way, shape, or form, worthy of his notice and memory. And for that, I feel truly special. Hey, Ace of Hearts, leaving him. So this is a bit of a game changer. So basically, this gives me a escape mechanism. Basically, at the end of each day, or the end of kind of these little journal entries I've been doing by cards as I flip them over, I get to roll a d6. Because I have the other ace I picked up, that means I get on a 5 or a 6 now. It won't just be a 6. I get to decrease my token count. So I've now picked up 10 tokens. And because of this card, every time at the end of one of these card entries, I get to kind of do a roll. And if I get a 5 or 6, courtesy of the other ace, I get to remove one of those tokens. If I get all those tokens down, I escape all this nightmare. Now also, if my stability goes to 0, I also escape, but we'll cover that if that becomes more of a thing. But yeah, this is good. I've already been thinking about leaving him, obviously. I think that's where my mind has drifted, as some of these cards have truly made me a tad uncomfortable. But yeah, let's start this off with our first dice roll, because we are thinking about leaving him at this point. Hey, we got to remove one of the points right off the bat, so cool. 9 more remaining before I come to my senses and truly leave this nightmare. But also, it's now time for the 5 of Spades. I suppose if I've had to talk about my mother, I should also talk about my father. Where my mother was harsh and demanding, he was distant. He knew how to be a father in the mechanical sense, in the keeping a roof over the head and keeping food in our bellies, but he was never capable of having closeness, having what most people refer to as a true relationship. Perhaps that's how I find myself as I am now, but yes. All right, dice roll time. And hey, 6. We might get out of here after all. And last but not least for the month, the Jack of Diamonds. Sweet everything. Perhaps it's all the thoughts about my parents lately. Perhaps, I don't know. I found myself asking him to tell me everything he knows about me, everything he's observed, every strength, every flaw, everything good and bad, and everything he thinks is horrible about. I figured this was a poor choice on my part, but he surprised me. Everything he said was kind, exactly what I needed to hear. He made me feel special in ways that I didn't think were possible and reassured me that there was nothing indeed wrong with me. I'm not sure why I accepted this to be different. Normally, I suspect the fiance might use this as a cruel moment to poke fun at someone or bring up some resentment. But no, he rose above all that. And despite all this, I still believe I truly do love him. And that kills my second stability die. I have 10 stability points left. All right, and now to roll to see if I get any closer to escaping this. That's my first failure at this. I do not get to drop my token count down by anything, but that also means it's time to roll for month 9, and I definitely have been through half the deck at this point, so yes, the fear is quite real at this point, but yeah, month 9, 4 of spades, sleep therapy. Perhaps in a show of some type of strange mercy or something, he has chosen to implant titanium locks in my elbows and knees. On the plus side of this, I'm now capable of popping my joints so that I can now sleep in this increasingly comfortable down on all fours position I am forced to walk in courtesy of the training and the hooves and whatnot. On the other hand, it has not been an easy transition. I've lost a lot of sleep. It's been a mess of brief hypnosis treatments that only seem to lull me to sleep for minutes, and then I find myself awake, unsure of how much of the night remains or how much has passed. It does seem to slowly be getting better. Perhaps, like all these things, I will find myself accustomed to this and adapted to this by the end of the month or so. And that drops my stability down by 1, putting me officially into single digits. And now time to roll to see if I get the fuck out of here. No dice. 4. More importantly, the 4 of diamonds. A fight. Perhaps it was overdue at this point. Perhaps it only made sense given everything, the sleep deprivation, the pain, the surgeries, the dysmorphia I now find myself under, but it all came to a head. I don't remember exactly what it was that set it off. It was something trivial. His insistence on moving me to an oat-based diet of some kind or something along those lines, or something about how I maybe wanted a sheet put across the hay in my bed, but I've never seen this side of him. He stormed off, and we've never truly come to this. I've never wanted to not be here more, to see the outside world again, but not just see it, interact with it, be with people, despite my, what I can only imagine might be horrific appearance at this point. The changes have been both dramatic and gradual somehow simultaneously that, well, I might not notice it, and I'm not sure what I truly look like to the average person. I suspect by now I look disturbingly more like a misshapen horse than a human of any kind. But yes, this was our first fight. It was a major one. It has put so much of this in perspective, and how it does feel as though I've been led by the nose through quite a few of these decisions. And only now looking back do I find myself thinking more about that. And with that being said, that does not get me closer to thinking about leaving, though, sadly, with a 3. But it also does not drop my stability either. So there's that, I suppose. That brings us to the end of month 9. And now, month 10. Uneventful month, apparently, given how this game tells me to interpret these things. But Queen card, the Queen of Clubs. Fuck ups. Perhaps it was our fight. Perhaps it's just the increasing everything. But I found myself thinking back to what led me down this path, the event that destroyed my life, so to speak. Perhaps it's something I could have gone back to, but having let it rest the way it has, I most certainly could not. We've all had bad roommates before, but I found myself in a situation where the roommate's name was on the lease and mine was not, and after being told that we had not paid the rent in over a year and being evicted, I found out that my roommate had not only been pocketing it, but had opened up a collection of credit cards and anything else you could use my social security number, shared mailing address for, and the chances of me ever finding housing again, short of a hotel, was essentially zero. On top of that, they had been posing as me and had quite succinctly destroyed my life in a variety of other sectors. I had become a liability at my job given my whole financial situation and was fired courtesy of the, and I quote, highly probability that I would accept bribes if need be. And yes, obviously this leads to a decrease in stability. More importantly, roll of the dice. See if I come to my senses. Nope, with a 4. That leads us to month 10 with a 4. There is not a lot of this deck left. How the fuck have I not gotten the last king yet? It's going to be a very strange thing if I deck out of this. I literally can't deck out of this. I'm gonna lose my stability, or I'm gonna king out of this at this point. And yeah, first up for month 10, the 3 of clubs. Dreams. Perhaps it's the time I've spent thinking about my old life. Perhaps it's, I don't know, just my current state of mind. Perhaps it's the fact that I'm turning into a fucking horse. But I've tried to remember what I wanted to be previously. A writer, an author, someone that would leave something in the world that would exist long after they had passed, that people could discover and enjoy and cherish and maybe learn something about me. Didn't have to be big, didn't have to be extravagant, it didn't have to change the world, just something that the right person or right people or right audience could find and just enjoy in a shape or form. Feel as though they knew someone or got comfort from or just gave them a break from their day or something. Really would have been nice to achieve that dream. And Roland? Nope, but it does drop my stability down to 7. This is not good. But more importantly, it's now time for the 3 of diamonds. A habit. Perhaps it's the pain, perhaps it's the sleep deprivation, perhaps it's, I don't fucking know what, but he chews too loud all of a sudden. Perhaps he's always chewed at this sound, but it sounds like he is a blender full of marbles with everything. And for God's fucking sake, the insistent on the carrots, the celery, the broccoli, things that snap, pop, crack with every mouthful. The peanuts. Oh, how did I forget the fucking peanuts? It's like standing next to someone that had their head replaced with a cement mixer full of gravel. If I could have, I would have strangled him right then and there. It's just chewing, though, and perhaps I'm sure it's my irritability at this point, but what started off as me simply saying perhaps he could chew with his goddamn fucking mouth closed led to yet another argument. We've made up since then, but I have noticed that he has swapped over to softer foods as of late. For that, I am eternally thankful. One step closer to coming to my senses, thank fucking God. But that also does drop my stability down by 1, and that leads us to the 8 of spades. Grazing therapy. Perhaps it's in response to my complaints about his chewing. Perhaps it's these pills he's had me on, but perhaps it's just the next turn of things. But I have finally, in his words, been able to graze successfully. It's been several months now of specialized enzyme pill, I guess, to build up some type of gut health or gut reaction that makes it possible for the human body to be able to digest plant matter properly. I didn't know we couldn't do that prior to this, but here I am learning once again another thing, and I now find myself capable of sustaining myself on grass, hay, and the occasional fruit or vegetable. Just yesterday, he finally took me outside to a field and just let me graze for hours. If I'm being honest, it was a tad unsettling as he watched with a cup of tea from the porch, smiling, nodding. I won't pretend that the various surgeries and whatnot and the reformed face, it didn't make it easier than several meals I've had to deal with lately, but there was something truly dehumanizing and demoralizing about it. Not enough to come to my senses, but enough to drop my stability down 1 more. And last but not least for the month is the 2 of hearts. His smile. I feel as though I've complained a lot. Perhaps I have been irritable with all the changes, but his smile is still one of the greatest gifts I can receive. The way he grins, the way he smiles, just the way he seems happy when he doesn't think I'm looking at him. His happiness makes me feel happy. It's infectious. like his glow, his warmth. It hits you, and then you feel happy with him. And despite all of this, his smile, his happiness, ultimately made all of this right. It's been a balm, an ointment, a reprieve from this truly bizarre set of circumstances I find myself in. Well, the one that's not make me come to the senses. I finished out month 10. Now for month 11 with just one. Okay. Queen of Clubs. Speech therapy. I'm not sure how much more I can keep doing this. There was another surgery, and he took a scalpel to my vocal cords. I can still talk for now, but it hurts, and he is attempting to teach me to communicate with my body, with whinnying and snorts and whatnot, gestures and nudges. He doesn't punish me if I try to speak, but he doesn't seem pleased about it when I do. It's getting harder and harder, and that'll obviously drop my stability down. Let's see if this offense is enough to drive me further away from him. It is not. Brings month 10 to an end, and for month 11, 6. And first off, for month 11, we have the Three of Hearts, his lips. My relationship with his lips has changed across the span of these last 10 or so months. I no longer have mine in the traditional sense, or at least not as I'm used to having them, but as he's remained the same, he can still kiss and love on me as he once did. And every kiss is still a radiant blast of affection that sends warmth and happiness through my body. In these increasingly complicated times, they show that he's sensitive and understands and feels for me as I go through all of this, which maybe makes all of this worth it. We'll drop my stability down by 1 as well. And let's see if this snaps me out of it at all. Yes! Don't think I'll catch up to stabilitying out at this point, but yeah. With that being said, time for... Oh, God damn it. King of Diamonds. You're so close. So goddamn close to going insane. Why am I celebrating that? That's a weird takeaway from this. King of Diamonds. Husbandry. I suppose this isn't the worst one to go out of in some ways. Seeing as this is my 4th king card, I have stopped thinking and I have surrendered myself to the process, and I am with my last, I put it this way, with my last conscious thoughts, if you will, I find out that I am with child, his child. I'm not sure if I'm really even a human anymore. I don't physically look like one. I barely physically feel like one. I don't eat like one. I don't sound like one. And I'm not quite sure when the final transformation takes place, when I truly become a horse. But a half year later, I give birth to a beautiful half-human, half-horse child that shares my flowing mane and elongated face. And with 3 stability remaining and 6 points left before I came to my senses and left this asshole, thank you for listening. This game is now over. On behalf of all of us at Negative Modifier, thank you for listening, and we do hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one, partially so you do not miss our next episode, but mostly because it helps new listeners find us. In addition to that, if you liked the episode, please consider clicking the thumbs up button below. If you'd like to further support the show, please consider joining us on Discord or becoming a Patreon patron.